not throw any brickbats at me. Or bats. Look, I don't think the problem is attitudinal, and I think it's a lack of information on your part, just an innocent lack of information.
There's a guy who says, don't throw any brickbats, and he's accusing me of lack of information.
I say with all due respect, Bob. Now hold on, I'm not trying to play a game. I'm saying I'm trying to be honest now. When you're poor, and you've been poor for centuries and centuries, and someone's got their foot on your neck, you don't know how to spell Marxist with one M or two X's. All you know is you want a piece of land, and you want to have some control over your life. And these people, have been... if communism is bad, what about fascism? Why don't we go into Chile and oust Pinochet? Why do we support fascists? If we say we're...
Russell, I think you're overlooking in your obsessive idealism, I think you're overlooking the central fact, which is the United States of America and our own security. And Somoza did not represent a danger to the United States security. I think even you would agree to that, although I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Neither did Elliot.
Now, when I was I was in that part of the world.
Yeah.
And the people, to a great extent, are what you say they are. They're people who just want to improve their lot in life a little bit. However, there is a cadre of trained ideologues who are manipulating these people. So you and I have no quarrel about the people. It's the trained ideologues who are manipulating those people.
What about the oligarchies, the 10 families that control all of those little countries for centuries and centuries, and it goes on and on? They control the land. They don't let the peasants grow it.
Well, why do we have to replace them with people who are inimical to the existence of the United States?
They're not inimical, Bob.
Oh, but they are. If they weren't inimical, I would have no opposition to them.
If any country in Africa have the right to have their own Monroe Doctrine in Africa and Europe and in Asia, do other countries have the right to their own Monroe Doctrine?
I'm not going to play your hypothetical game here because I don't know where it's leading. Whether you want to call it a Monroe Doctrine or whether you want to call it an American doctrine, the fact is we were well served, well respected for a long, long time. If it weren't, we'd just go in there and smash with one division. We'd smash the El Salvador rebels, but we know we can't do that. American public opinion would not allow it because apparently there are too many people, Russell, who have your incredible idealism.
Well, I don't think it's idealism. I think.
Well, I'm trying to put the best face on it.
Well, I don't know. I just wish you would. Not see everything as an East-West problem. Not everything is an East-West problem.
I know that. That's why I supported the president going to China.
Right.
To this is the countries of the West, the East, wherever they are, to group together and to raise the economies of these people. It's not through the ideology of communism that poverty will be lifted. As Macmillan said before the United Nations, if communism was such a big thing, why is it that everybody is trying to escape from these countries, and if they could, they would even take the chance of being shipwrecked?
And if it's so great, I ask Russell and all the other Russells, if it's so great, why do they not permit free elections? There is no communist country. The only communist country that was going to try it was Czechoslovakia, and they got rid of the poor guy that tried to do it. Well, there it is again, and again, and again. They will never learn, will they? How many more innocent people have to be slaughtered by brigands, by mutants, by sworn enemies of society, until we learn that when a person signals that he is an enemy of society, when a savage skunk announces that he is not fit to live in a civilized community, when will we learn that that person must never see the light of day in freedom again? James E. Daniels should have been executed for his past murders. But he was not. Therefore, James E. Daniels should have been locked up until he died of natural causes. But he was not. I just don't know how it is that people who have records showing that they have committed such serious, violent crimes, how it is that they are let loose. You know who I'm talking about? I'm talking about that state trooper, Carlos Negron, who was shot to death yesterday after stopping to check a van that was parked on a New Jersey Turnpike shoulder in Mercer County. Two men, fortunately, who murdered Negron, were killed 45 minutes later when their stolen vehicle hit a utility pole at high speed. Too bad they couldn't have hit that pole at high speed before they gunned down brave, courageous Officer Negron. What do you say to Mrs. Negron? What will you say to his son, who will be 1 year old in 2 weeks? What do you say? What do you say to yourselves? You're part of this society. You allow it to go on. I mean, you know, we hear story after story. This is not an isolated case. It goes on and on. It's interminable. I feel like a broken record. But it isn't what I am saying that's the broken record. It's what we're doing that's the broken record. What does it take? Why are our political leaders such wimps? Why does the Empire State have one governor after another who vetoes a death penalty bill? Why? Even in those states where a death penalty bill is on the books, is it so seldom used? And don't be misled by some of the hyped up media attention paid to those all too rare executions, considering the number of people on death row in Florida, in Louisiana. Governor Bob Graham didn't throw his hat in the ring for the Democratic primary, but maybe next time around he will, and if he does, he may get a lot of votes. Because the Florida governor is one of the very few political leaders in the country who courageously stands foursquare behind the death penalty. Because he is foursquare for some old-fashioned, silly notion that society, not the criminal, that the victim, not the predator, deserves the consideration of all the rest of us. Yes, indeed. Well, and you may or may not know that the Soviet Union announced it was boycotting the Los Angeles Games. That announcement came today. Caught a lot of people off guard, surprised a lot of people, including Peter Uberov, who said inevitably the Soviets would show up. But I guess this is their tit for tat, since President Carter had us boycott the 1980 games in Moscow due to the fact the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. But that's all right that they're in Afghanistan, have been slaughtering Afghans. That's all right. You don't hear many people complain about that. Speaking of complaining, we're going to hear in a little while from somebody who apparently is more concerned with what the United States does to protect itself than what the Soviet Union does to force us to want to protect ourselves. At least, so it would seem to some people. I'm going to talk to a guy who comes out with a dramatic title of a book called Arming the Heavens. Now, that'll catch your attention, won't it? Some dodos might think that God's going to walk around carrying a gun. But that isn't what he's talking about. Anyway.
As the Baron Pierre de Coubertin wished it so, his dream was not to politicize it, but to bring the youth of the world together, to bring Soviet boys and girls, Soviet young men and women, together with American young men and women, have them engage in a festival downtown Los Angeles.
I think that, with all due respect to you, sir, I think anybody who really believes that that was possible is extremely naive in view of the fact that there's no natural propinquity between athletes competing from Iron Curtain countries. They see to it that their people are sequestered, that there's no natural social intercourse between their members and our members, that the natural friendships that could evolve, as you outline them, they frustrate them. They are not able to take place. I think of them. We have nothing right now because the Soviets, for very specious reasons, are boycotting the games in Los Angeles. Mr. Uberov is off to a very inauspicious start. One final point, looking ahead beyond what the Soviet Union does. What about all their stooges? What about East Germany? What about Czechoslovakia? Countries like that, Eastern Bloc countries, will they also boycott?
Let's take East Germany, for example. They are the third strongest Olympic power in the world next to the Soviet Union and the USA. In my opinion, and I'm a sports person, not a political scientist,
yes,
the East Germans will come to the United States and clean up.
And clean up. The men as well as the women?
Certainly.
I tell you, those women, I've seen from real up close their alleged female contingent. In the I happened to be on the same plane with a group of them coming from Europe to Montreal in 1976.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess there is a third sex after all, Professor.
That the East Germans will come to Los Angeles because they are not the puppet of the Soviet Union, despite what many people think. They are not the puppet of the Soviet Union.
Well,
they share the same ideology, but they are not the direct puppet of Moscow. My understanding from my small knowledge of international politics.
Dr. John Lucas, professor of sports history, Penn State University. He's a diplomat in Rome, says Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi has apparently survived, unfortunately, an attack on his barracks in Tripoli, Libya today. Western diplomats and Italian news reports say about 15 rebels attacked the barracks with rockets and automatic weapons. His assault was apparently crushed. One rumor has it that the 15 rebels were inspired by some maniac who has been shouting, "Get Gaddafi." Let's fill the audience in just in case they may not have noticed. The congressman's letter to the Sandinista Commandante, Daniel Ortega. And I do believe there were 10 congressmen because I think Jim Wright joined the other 9.
That's right. It was actually on his stationery.
Okay, to his everlasting discredit. What did they say in their letter? Do you have some highlights here? They said, "Dear Commandante, and as members of the U.S. House of Representatives, we regret the fact that better relations do not exist between the United States and your country. We have been and remain opposed to U.S. support for military action directed against the people or government of Nicaragua." That's incredible.
Well, it's not only incredible, Bob, but it's the kind of thing that before you said it would bring disgrace to those men who wrote it. It goes well beyond that. What it does is it undercuts the policies of the United States of America. It undercuts the policies not only of the President Ronald Reagan, but it undercuts the presidency of the United States. Essentially, what it does is it establishes that these 10 congressmen disagree with a policy that's been approved by the Congress of the United States, which is being paid for by the Congress of the United States, and they were offering an opportunity for aid and comfort someplace else for those Sandinistas to go with their problems then to the government. They're offering 10 people that they can go to and feel they have friends with in the United States Congress to lobby the American people against their own better interests.
Mr. Romano, quite frankly, though, would you be this troubled if it weren't for the fact that the man you hope to oppose in November, Robert Torricelli, is one of the individuals who signed the Dear Commandante letter prostrating themselves before Daniel Ortega?
Would be just as outraged at any other time. The fact of the matter is that I am the Republican nominee for Congress from my district, and the gentleman who supposedly represents me and the people in the district that I want to represent has gone out and made comments and written a letter to a dictatorship in Central America, and I don't believe the people of the district of New Jersey and the 9th Congressional District of Bergen County agree to a large part with that, so somebody has to say something, and as the standard bearer of my party, and hopefully representative of those people, it's my responsibility to speak up.
For example, Mr. Torricelli, what do you suppose was in his mind when they sent this ridiculous letter?
It's an obvious attempt to disagree with the president, to undercut the president of the United States and his foreign policy, and to continue this horribly new pattern of making politics out of foreign affairs. You know, that I would send a letter to Managua, Nicaragua, and tell Mr. Ortega, give him a little bit of a history lesson, or give him a little bit of lesson in political science in America, and hopefully he'd understand it. The letter goes on to say that the signatories of that letter don't have the right to speak for the American people, and indeed they don't speak for the American people. The Congress of the United States has voted funds and so on for the actions going on in Nicaragua, and only the President of the United States, as constitutionally mandated as chief executive, rightfully speaks for the American people in all matters of foreign policy, and that he should take that into consideration. I then went on to ask him, or actually discuss with him, the problems of his strict censorship of the press. I also discussed in my letter some of the things that have gone on that these 10 members of the United States Congress didn't see as concerns. Among those were some of those excesses and of human rights violations that have gone on, have been the forced exile of most of the Jewish population, the seizure of the synagogue in Managua, the forced relocation of the Mosquito Indians, the treatment of Catholic ideologies as if it was a subversive ideology, which I find fascinating. The disappearances documented by human rights groups of individuals, and the jailing of those who expressed dissident opinions in Nicaragua. These offenses, I told him, could not be tolerated and could not be condoned. I have said... Did
you mail the letter?
Yes, the letter went to Managua last night.
Think about the transgressions against human rights and the obvious, I suspect, impetus of the PLO because of the one of the first moves the Ortegas did upon taking order was to close that synagogue, was to begin to crack down on a very, very small Jewish minority. And I have to believe that the PLO inspired that. But whether they inspired it or not, what amazes me is the virtual lack of outcry in this country against a regime which is just as repressive as some of the dark days in Argentina's recent past.
Inconceivable that the United States, that these congressmen would go on a letter like this to a regime which has the only embassy for the PLO in the Western Hemisphere. The whole discussion of free elections in a society and in a country that has a dictator that isn't free is almost a joke. It is a joke, as a matter of fact. How can you hold free elections when you don't have free people?
Oh, it was Mr. Solar's Mr. Wright and a Mr. Bond.
Yes, good point. It's interesting that this had to be exposed on the floor of the House of Representatives. The congressman I'm concerned with, Bob Torricelli, has a tendency to get just about everything he wants and get a great deal of press. But this apparently is something that he didn't really want the people to know about. He is one of the greatest abusers of the franking privilege, probably in the state of New Jersey, and he certainly had plenty of time to put it in one of his monthly newsletters to the people. But obviously, he didn't think it was a letter that they would approve either. Who wrote those? Your members of Congress, and If you want later, we'll give you the other 7, and you can...
The other 7.
All right.
Bill Alexander.
Okay.
Matthew F. McHugh. G. Torricelli.
I got him.
Edward P. Boland. David R. Obey. Robert Garcia. He represents the district in the South Bronx.
Right.
Garcia.
Right.
And Lee Hamilton.
Ham.
I don't know whether it would be fair to characterize the writing of a Commandante letter, Dear Commandante letter, if it would be fair to characterize it as the work of liberals, because it is so outrageously, at best, naive, so ludicrous, so self-defeating for the United States, that even though I myself don't consider myself a political liberal, I would want to insult all the liberals by characterizing this obscenity as a liberal letter. I guess I'm the only one in the media that has remembered Philip Cardillo, and I think it was one of the blackest days in the history of New York when he was murdered and his murderers were allowed to get off. I think that John Lindsay, the Tower of Jelly, and his number 1 henchman, Pat Murphy, will go to their graves with this mark against them. I can't say enough for what an incredible disgrace this whole episode was. In his brilliant book, Murder in the Mosque, Sonny Grasso outlines everything. In his equally brilliant book, Target Blue, Robert Daly documents everything. But in all candor, Dominic, it's very unrealistic to think that your idea has even a glimmer of hope. The harsh realities of 1984 America are such that a murdered cop who gave his life thinking he was going to the aid of another police officer. You are indeed naive, Dominic, to think for 1 minute that has any chance of seeing the light of day. Denounce Farrahkan. He will not chastise Farrahkan. Newsweek magazine quotes Jesse Jackson thusly, and I'm going to read from Newsweek. Quote, there's a place down off Maxwell Street called Jewtown. Understand? Jewtown is where Jaime gets you if you can't negotiate them suits down, you understand? That's not meant as anti-Semitic. You go down to Jewtown and you start negotiating, and if Hyman and Sons show up, they're called Jaime. There's no insult even to them. Victor Gold was so upset by reading that in Newsweek magazine that he wrote an open letter to Jesse Jackson. It's titled From Jaime's Son. I'd like to share it with you now. Dear Jesse, as a matter of fact, I understand perfectly. I don't know Maxwell Street from Delancey, but growing up in New Orleans, I knew Rampart Street, where it was said the blacks did their Saturday shopping. I also remember that my father didn't like the word nigger, though the people who did would argue that it wasn't meant as an insult, that black people themselves used it. But my father knew better. Whether black people used it was beside the point, he told me. The word was offensive, and if we, as Jews, didn't understand why, then 4,000 years of history hadn't taught us anything. My father was an odd man, Jesse. By your lights, an odd Jew. Although his name was Jaime, he didn't fit your stereotype. In his prime, before the bottom fell out in 1932, he ran a neighborhood grocery, not a clothing store. In those days, small grocers did business on credit, not Visa or American Express, just customer tabs. And when the full impact of the Depression hit the neighborhood, Jaime was caught in a squeeze. There were due bills from his suppliers, but his customers, many of them black families, were short of cash. Years later, when I asked my father why his grocery store had gone under, he said, because you don't cut off credit to a regular customer buying milk for her baby. So much for Jaime's cunning skill at negotiation. But that's neither here nor there, because I doubt, Jesse, that this little family story will make much of a dent in your carapace of bigotry. I know firsthand, having heard it from the horse's mouth, the deep abiding nature of your anti-Jewish animus. You don't recall the conversation? Let me refresh your recollection. For starters, just to set the ethics of the situation straight, it wasn't off the record. Nor am I one of those passengers who sit in an airplane cabin with an ear cocked to conversations going on around them. But in this case, 5 years ago in Atlanta, it would have been hard not to overhear the gist of what you were telling your traveling companion, Congressional Delegate Walter Fauntleroy. You said, "I don't care what they say, you just can't trust the Jews." And Fauntleroy responded, "No, you can't." And then you said, "I never have trusted those people." Remember the occasion, Jesse? All right, a little more detail. We were in the front compartment of a Delta flight to Washington, still on the ground at the Atlanta airport. I was in an aisle seat reading a magazine when you and Fauntleroy boarded, having just attended a much-publicized meeting of the NAACP. According to press reports, it had been quite a session, the focus of discussion being the NAACP's queasiness over your and Fauntleroy's recent embrace of Arafat and the PLO. We were the first passengers on board, waiting for the others to arrive. As I recall, you were in a business suit, not your standard khaki safari outfit of that period, and you had worked up something of a lather en route to the airport. That much I gathered by the way you blew past the stewardess and began declaiming once you were seated, one row behind me. Believe me, I tried, well, half tried, not to pay attention, but hearing the word Jews uttered by Jesse Jackson at that time was too much for my curiosity, journalistic and otherwise. I never have trusted those people. And then repeated, you just can't trust them. You just can't trust them. Well, now, call me hypersensitive Jaime's son, but there was an unmistakable twist to the way you kept saying those people, a tone of contempt, an inflection of loathing that had me reaching for my pen and pad just to make sure I had the quotes right. Until that moment, I hadn't considered your newfound interest in the Middle East as anything but another Jesse Jackson special, a media caper aimed at headlines and cameras. True, the idea had occurred to me that as with most of your capers, you could be looking for a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. In this case, embracing the Palestinian cause might and did bring in Arab contributions. But the idea that Jesse Jackson, the civil rights icon of American liberalism, would actually share with the American Nazi Party and the KKK an aversion to those people, that came as a stunner. The plane filled, the engine started up, and we were on our way. Frankly, Jesse, I would have liked to overhear more, but row-to-row communication at 35,000 feet isn't too reliable for someone who wants to be absolutely sure what's being said. Your earlier quotes, though, I was sure enough of those to consider the possibility of writing a newspaper or magazine piece. But once down to earth, I reconsidered. After all, what did I have? Only a distasteful ethnic slur made by a public figure aboard an aircraft. That might be sufficient to create a cause célèbre coming from a Republican cabinet member, but not from a liberal icon. No, aside from mentioning the episode to my family and a few friends, I simply tucked our one-sided conversation into the folds of my mind as I watched you move from caper to caper over the years. It didn't surprise me when you complained of being sick and tired of hearing about the Holocaust, and I hardly needed an item-by-item report from the Anti-Defamation League to confirm your animus toward Jews. What did take me aback, however, was the world-class creativity you showed in describing those folks down off Maxwell Street. I had thought I knew every racial and religious epithet going, but until Jesse Jackson came along, I'd never heard my father's name invoked as an ethnic non-insult. So you see, Jesse, I do understand you and your new direction only too well. I understand that you understand that your real talent lies not in your ability to rouse black audiences. Louis Farrahkan can do that as well, but to pull the strings on white liberal guilt. You have a genius for it, a gift that leaves liberals, including Jewish liberals, praising your crusade for peace and justice, even as you assault them. That leads New York Times columnist Sidney Schanberg to confess that he, quote, struggled for some time against writing a piece criticizing you because the issues raised by Mr. Jackson are fundamental and humane, and because describing him as a polarizer could damage those issues, unquote. Would he have had the same struggle over a polarizing white demagogue, raising the same fundamental issues? That leads the Times to credit you with bringing new respect to black aspirations, even as your friend Farrahkan lauds Hitler as great because he raised up his people, which is only to say he brought new respect to German aspirations. Or is that interpretation unfair, to compare, if only in passing, a racist demagogue merely sick and tired of hearing about the Holocaust to the racist dictator who created it? Not by my lights, Jesse, for I take Farrahkan at his word when he directs the aspirations of black audiences, your audiences, toward hatred, not only of those people, but of all white devils, not to mention black traitors to your cause. And you? I am a black who happened to be born in America, you say, defending your mission, not, quote, an American who happened to be born black. What more do we need to understand that your racist soulmate, Louis Farrahkan, has a better grasp of your crusade's ultimate aim than does the New York Times? Quite a caper, Jesse, running not so much for President of the United States as for Duce of the disadvantaged. Some new direction, the racial cant, the charismatic spellbinder, the class war rhetoric, the crowd in heat. I think we've been in this direction before. As Jaime would say, if your fatuous apologists don't understand that, then the history of the past half-century hasn't taught them much. And it's signed Jaime's son, Victor Gold. And I'll have comment on this last story. I want you to stay tuned. Presidential candidate Jesse Jackson says he'd go to Moscow if it would help get the Soviets to change their minds about boycotting the Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. Jackson made the statement today after meeting with the Soviet ambassador Anatoly Dobrinin in Washington. I'll withhold comment right now, but you'll hear it in just about a minute or so. I ask you, who represents the United States of America? On the judicial level, it is the Supreme Court. On the executive level, it is the President of the United States. On the congressional level, it is the Senate and House. We have 535 representatives, a president, a vice president, a secretary of state. I have looked at the Constitution, and I don't see any role for a so-called shadow government. I don't see any role for an alternative president. I don't see any role for a rainbow coalition. I don't see any role for an anti-Semitic, anti-white, charismatic orator who calls himself Reverend. There is no doubt in anybody's mind, anybody with half a brain, that Assad used the Reverend Jackson when he let out Lieutenant Robert O. Goodman. There is no doubt that Anatoly Dobrinin met with Jackson for propaganda purposes, but what disturbs me is the arrogance of this man to think that people are going to be fooled into believing that somehow or other he has some magic that can turn lions into lambs. Is he going to, by some legerdemain or some great super salesmanship, be able to persuade the Soviets to participate in the Olympics? Of course not. You know better than that. However, if the Soviets find it in their best interest to help further divide an already divided nation, they could pretend that they were influenced by the kisser of Yasser Arafat, the hugger of the PLO, the discoverer of Hymietown.
I don't want to go into details, but in my view, there's a lot of things that, with all the freedoms and liberties which are granted to media in this country, it's a question of responsibility and self-restraint. Unfortunately, media does not exercise these very important qualities. They'd rather behave like arrogant, belligerent people, challenging something that obviously makes them personally more popular, sells more deodorant, probably. Company, at least one person from Look magazine, and I saw the whole process as it developed right in front of my eyes. And I was surprised how easy it was to take a group of Americans for a good big ride. Actually, I was disgusted deep inside. I was amazed. Why would Americans go to this? Now I understand more after 14 years living here in this part of the world. I understand that there are certain reasons for this. There are certain tactics which are being used to take advantages of such things as ignorance, parochialism, ethnocentrism, and something that KGB language called education of masses, and I simply call demoralization process. I describe it in details during my lectures.
Many Americans are idealistic. And we think if we treat the Soviets as we wish they'd act, that maybe they'll act that way. You understand?
I understand, but it's totally wishful thinking, because for the last 66 years, Soviet leaders, I don't call them Russians. It's a bunch of self-imposed mass murderers, bandits. They had been demonstrated their behavior consistently for the last 66 years. Russians, or people in USSR, love America dearly. As a matter of Russia, as a superpower which is belligerent to the United States, is consistently presented to you by your mass media. It's a false image. They should concentrate their hatred and skepticism on a group of self-imposed dictators of my nation who are hated by majority of population.
You know, if you could turn the focus of the American media away from cross-examining the president about his anti-Soviet rhetoric, because they make it sound as though first came his rhetoric, and then came Soviet intransigence and Soviet troublemaking.
Yeah, just the other way around.
Of course, but did you happen to catch his press conference at 1 o'clock this afternoon?
No, I missed it. I was on the way here.
The cross-examination from the people that I mentioned and others made it sound as though everything was going just swimmingly well. And then Ronald Reagan took office and called the Soviets an evil empire and criticized them for their policies, and then they got mad. But up until that time, everything was just peachy.
Yeah, it's misinterpretation of events. I would say that economically speaking, under Reagan, there are quite a lot of things that Russians gained. Ronald Reagan lifted grain embargo. He allowed American companies to supply the technology for the Siberian pipeline, which goes to Europe, which is a suicide for your friends in West Europe. Also, State Department allowed Soviets to come to Olympics bringing 25 Air Float planes and one ship uninspected by American police and customs service, which is a guarantee of a little invasion of Soviet spies, about 10,000 of them. And I work on I saw at least one of the ships, Alexander Pushkin, which is literally a floating headquarters of the KGB. So on the level of practical policies, I would say under Ronald Reagan, there are quite a number of things that are quite not as belligerent to USSR as the media tries to present them. Talking, yes, he talks tough. So what? It doesn't mean much. Soviets are used to all kind of verbal exercise, flexing muscles and calling all kind of names. And so.
But would you guess that the Soviet Union would like to see Ronald Reagan defeated in November?
Well, naturally, they want to get as much involved in internal political process in the United States as possible. And unfortunately, I would say, thanks to media, thanks to your intellectuals, they have access. They do interfere in domestic policies, and they want to get rid of anyone who is quote-unquote unflexible or unreasonable or not sober-minded, like some of the Democrats, such as Walter Mondale or Jesse Jackson. These people are called in Pravda soberly-minded progressive politicians. Simply by shaking hands with the puppet of USSR in Damascus, Jesse Jackson elevated himself into the rank of progressive American. I think he should be very, very much ashamed and cautious about this. And yet he's very proud, and that's the way media presents him. It's very unfortunate, I would say.
You know, I was in the Soviet Union in 1978, was made aware of the fact that they thought that I was some kind of an agent because I'm a journalist.
Well, naturally, because every Soviet journalist is an agent, right, by definition.
Right. They couldn't believe that I don't work for the government, not for the CIA. They just couldn't believe that.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, they were sure that I was some kind of a government agent for the following reason. A fellow by the name of Joe Adamoff. Do you know Joe Adamoff?
I know him, yes, of course. He's not as good as my former colleague, Vladimir Posner. He is the top.
Oh, Posner is very smooth. But Adamoff told the people there, don't give this guy Bob Grant a visa because he's a, quote, right-wing anti-Soviet agitator. So they would not give me the visa. Well, I prevailed upon a United States congressman to see what he could do, and he talked to Clement Zabaki, the late chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. He talked to the State Department. The State Department talked to somebody in the Soviet Union, and I got my visa after all. So when I was in Moscow, this woman by the name of Ludmilla said, we know that you're a CIA agent because your government wanted desperately to get you into this country. And every time I made a talk to my group, they monitored me very closely. Now, the fact is, I tried to explain I was taking a commercial tour. You know, it had nothing to do with the government. But they would not believe that.
Well, it doesn't really matter what they believe or make appear to believe. If I were an American journalist and if I was blamed to be a CIA agent while visiting USSR, I would say yes, and I'm very proud to be so. And we know that most of the Soviet journalists stationed here are KGB agents. One of them is my former colleague, Vladimir Simonov. I met him in Moscow, and he was working in India at the same time that I was working for the Soviet embassy.
Doesn't it amaze you that Ted Koppel seems to love to have Vladimir Posner and Joe Adamoff on his Nightline so often, and the American dummies watching at home hear these guys introduced as news analysts.
Right. Well, they don't analyze anything. They just play back.
Maybe this is the beginning of some wisdom.
Well, Jane Fonda is a wishy-washy moneymaker. She may say anything she pleases, but once a traitor of this country is always a traitor, especially a person who made such big, filthy money on betraying this nation, virtually betraying not only this nation, but beautiful, friendly people of Vietnam and Cambodia.
You don't...
I'm not a traitor to my country. I'm a traitor to a bunch of self-imposed dictators who are hated by majority of my people. And if your multinationals, your establishment, your intellectuals and media stop aiding the Soviet tyrants, the Soviet people will take care of them. They will kick them out. if there is no technology, no credits, no money, no grain, and no diplomatic appeasement to the junta of the Soviet Union, the Soviet population know what to do with them. They'll be charged with high treason and tried same way as Nuremberg trial tried the Nazis and war criminals in Germany.
Tomas Schuman exposing the manipulations of the Soviet Union. Thank you, Mr. Schuman. Don Kowet is with us right now. He co-authored that cover story and TV guide that first probed the fairness and accuracy of the CBS documentary titled The Uncounted Enemy of Vietnam Deception. You may recall that article later won the Society of Professional Journalists Distinguished Service Award in magazine reporting.
That's true. Before the book was even published, CBS had launched a massive, unprecedented publicity campaign. My publisher says to chill the book. I say to kill the book. They're hoping they could knock the publisher out of the box initially and have him pull a book from the bookstore so that no one would get a chance to read it. What they did was send out massive mailings to book reviewers at 50 of the largest magazines and newspapers, to book reviewers, telling them that the book was malicious and reckless, words that are buzzwords that suggest that somebody's going to file a libel suit. They followed up and demanded that people who booked me on my author's tour also book people from CBS, again in language that threatened possible litigation. Comes when they send the letters to the book reviewers, suggesting that if they do something about this book, that they're going to be in danger of some kind of lawsuit. I think that's stepping out of bounds.
Have they chilled anybody? Have they had to use the legal phrase, had a chilling effect on anybody?
I don't know if they have chilled yet because the reviews aren't out. I think that what they tried to do was, and in some sense they succeeded, was putting a doubt in people's minds about the credibility of the book before they read it. The TV guide has
to prove malice. The general, has to prove malice in order to win this case.
Malice, and that the premise of the documentary of a Westmoreland-led conspiracy was not true. He's got the double burden in a libel case being a public figure. I think it's going to be a tough fight because it has to be, because no public figure has ever, no ex-public official has ever won under the law as it stands. If Westmoreland wins, it's going to prove that someone can win. Right now, the other side, the CBS side, is arguing that Westmoreland is libel-proof as a public official. Westmoreland was invited to, at the last minute, right before the lawsuit was about to be filed, after a proposed panel show had fallen through, Westmoreland was offered 15 minutes of airtime, unedited, before that panel show. But that's when CBS already knew that Westmoreland was moving to file for a lawsuit. He demanded an apology initially, and they wouldn't give it to him.
If any heads rolled at CBS, heads who were involved with the production of The Uncounted Enemy?
Well, the producer, George Cryle, has been suspended. He was suspended last June and is still on suspension.
For what reason?
For surreptitiously taping a confidential, as opposed to off-the-record, telephone call with Robert McNamara, and then taking an awfully long time to remember that he did it. It's a kind of a gray area. CBS policy is, this is the kind of hypocrisy that exists in the broadcast industry. CBS policy is that you cannot tape a telephone call without prior permission of CBS. However, CBS can send its 60 Minutes cameras barging into the lobby of your radio station or into your office without giving anybody any prior permission. So I think actually that Crowell was suspended over a minor infraction. I think that he'd become a problem for them. He was doing a documentary and they didn't want to air it. This is after The Uncounted Enemy. So they were looking for an excuse to suspend him.
Uncounted Enemy, a Vietnam Deception. In that program, General Westmoreland, former commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam, was accused of engineering a conspiracy in the year leading up to the Tet Offensive to suppress the numerical size of the enemy. The resulting furor generated front-page news across the country, and along with a cover story and TV guide co-authored by our guest, induced CBS to initiate an unprecedented 6-week internal investigation. Now, the upshot, you may recall, was a formal statement by CBS that while it admitted many of the charges, basically defended the integrity of the documentary. It was then that General Westmoreland filed a $120 million libel suit, the largest in the history of the American media. Haag, who quoted in USA Today, says reporters are probably the most self-righteous, arrogant, and least self-critical group of people in America. Outside of JFK, it seems as though they show their contempt for any president. They treat him like an errand boy.
I think they act as though they were prosecutors, except that a prosecutor really can act that way only if he has some sort of evidence, some sort of suspicion, and after all, there's also a judge to moderate a prosecutor, there's a defense attorney, and so on. In press conferences, the press takes a clearly adversarial role. It treats the president as an enemy, treats the government as an enemy. Now, let me enlarge for this a moment. The press greatly complained about not being allowed to witness the liberation of Grenada. I think that was a great idea, because frankly, the press would have taken the usual adversarial role, and in military operations don't object to their being criticized afterwards and so on, but will no more criticize them while they're going on as you criticize, I don't know, a surgical operation and second-guess the surgeon while he's operating.
Well, in her column yesterday, she talks about the murder of Highway Patrolman Carlos Negron out in New Jersey. And she points out that Negron would not have been murdered had the death penalty been carried out in the case of the skunk who killed him, because this guy who killed Negron had already been convicted of a previous murder.
Yeah.
And she says she finally realizes that there is deterrence. At least the people who have killed once already are deterred from ever killing again.
That's the least, yes. There's more, and also, you know, many people have the illusion that lifelong imprisonment is a real alternative to the death penalty. It isn't. People who are sentenced to life usually are out in 10, sometimes 15 years, depending or so. I know of no one who spends his life in prison. And some people simply should never be set free because they're too dangerous.
Right. Professor van den Haag authored this article. I'm going to read it. It's very short. Listen carefully, please. If you read the paper or listen to TV as we liberated Grenada, you heard less about the battle with the Cubans than about the battle with the media. They were indignant because no accommodations were provided for them. Reporters claimed a right to be accommodated. But there is no such right, and reporters would have been in the way in Grenada as much as they would be during surgery. The Constitution grants all of us, not just reporters, the right to say or print whatever we want, unhindered by the government. It grants none of us any special privileges for reporting. Reporters, probably the most self-righteous, arrogant, and least self-critical group of people in America, assert that they represent a public interest in information. But they systematically confuse information relevant to the public interest with stimulating public curiosity so as to sell papers. Catering to sensationalism has led to lengthy reports on the private life and death of David Kennedy, a man who never stood for public office. Reporters should report about crimes. A criminal forfeits his privacy. His victim does not. Yet the media will aggravate the painful fate of victims by invading their privacy. Worse, with public personalities, allegations often are represented as facts, or facts are shown in a sinister and sensational light. Richard Allen was hounded out of public life because he had forgotten $1,000 in some drawer. Ed Meese borrowed some money from friends and forgot to list all his loans. He is represented as sleazy. He will be cleared, but the political damage is done. What can be done? Libel laws should be strengthened. They make it far too costly for ordinary persons to sue. The right granted by the courts to libel public personalities, if no malice can be shown, should be taken away. Any wrong and damaging allegation should entitle the person harmed to sue and prevail. Not least, the public should assert its right to privacy. You need not answer a reporter's question. If he threatens vengeance, libel laws should protect you. Will, you know what I mean?
The only thing I feel that Lyndon Johnson wouldn't have put up with this if he were around today, and he would have found a way to get this thing straight.
Well, thank God he's not around. It was the worst disaster we've ever had. Thank you.
They probably are annoyed that he doesn't do everything they would like to do. Moreover, I would think they also are annoyed with his policies. But my point was a little more general. I think the media are particularly annoyed at this administration because most of the members of the media are not just the Democrats, they voted for McGovern, in effect. So Mr. Reagan is not going to please them. But I think my point goes beyond that. Any administration in office, the media tend to be opposed to somewhat, because they just like to be opposed to authority. That is useful up to a point, but only up to a point. And I think we have gone beyond that point.
Two observations regarding what the congressman from Georgia said before.
Yes.
I'm glad we got people like him. Number one, I would like to know why this is not front-page stuff, why there is no publicity regarding these contracts found on Grenada.
I disagree with you, Tony, because I think I know the addle-brained, idealistic, ultra-radical in this country. I'll go along with the congressman, not even call them liberal. And the arrogance that they have is so great that they really do believe if you pat a lion on the neck, you can turn him into a lamb. They really believe that.
To urge you to urge your audience to protest to the Soviets about the refusal to leave, let Mr. Sakharov leave the Soviet Union for medical help, as a result of which Professor Sakharov, the Nobel Prize winner, heroic character, and his wife are on a hunger strike and are near death. And it's a very simple task for all those people who want to really put their energies where their mouths are. They can call the Soviet mission. I'll give you that number. The UN Soviet mission, 861-4900. This costs 10 cents, and this might save their lives and show the Soviets what our views are.
I certainly am not going to discourage anybody from calling. As a matter of fact, quite the contrary. I salute you for what you have said.
Okay.
And I'm delighted that you used the Bob Graham program to get your message to the people.
Yes,
I really am. I'm grateful to you for thinking enough of this program to do that. Nevertheless, let me say, and I hope I'm wrong, no amount of phone calls is going to deter them, because the Soviets know that they can shoot down commercial airline jets and kill 268 civilians. They can invade a nation and use chemical warfare on that nation. They can infiltrate any Latin American country and do all of those things with impunity. That we will be outraged, we will be indignant. For a while, people will say, "You let the Sakharovs die," and then the next thing you know, the United States will again be on the defensive. The President of the United States will go to a press conference, and the Sam Donaldsons and the Helen Thomases and the Andrea Mitchells will talk to him like he's some little errand boy who has to answer to them. They will talk to the President as though he is the only person on the world stage responsible for the tension between the Soviet Union and the free world. Their child, some move.
Mason, good afternoon.
How do you do, ma'am? May I speak to the ambassador?
Who is calling?
This is a professor from...
I'm sorry, who is calling?
We are calling on radio station WMCA on behalf of the American people. We would like to implore you not to let the Sakharovs die.
1 moment. Okay.
Hello?
Hold on, please.
All right.
Please hold on.
Oh, we lost it. I tell you, Charles, we lost it. Was she hung up? Oh, excuse me. She hung up.
Did she hang up, actually?
She hung up, Charles.
Oh, well.
You mentioned, you left out is Dellums, Congressman Dellums. There's another one.
Dellums.
Dellums.
Yeah, Ron Dellums.
Ron Dellums, Captain Congress.
Ron Dellums has never said anything in praise of the United States in his miserable, useless life.
Well, he's the only one to hold out against when the KL, Korean airline, was shot down.
That's right. He refused to condemn the Soviet Union for shooting down the Korean airline.
Into committing a crime by putting him in a palace like that.
Why did you do only 2 of the 10 days?
Well, the fine. In fact, there was a businessman, a city commissioner from the county area, who came forward and paid the $105, and the law says if somebody pays the fine, out you go. You know, it costs them $200 a day to care for an inmate in the Detroit House of Correction, and yet they hit me with a $105 fine. The justice and the logic of that seems to escape me. But remember why. The kids, 50 young girls and boys, sodomized and raped, and the police and the mayor doing nothing. The average cop wanted to do something, but the mayor was tying their hands.
Well, you're talking about Mayor Coleman Young of Detroit, who says that you are a troublemaker, a misfit, misguided, and a sick man.
Bob, you've seen Detroit. You've seen the deterioration there. That city, once the pinnacle of this country, once a power, has lost so many people. They've gone all over the country, not just because of economic deterioration, but because of crime. People that are barred, locked, and just frozen in fear for the reality of what is America's murder capital. And in fact, there are more murders per person, per square inch in Detroit than in Northern Ireland, than took place in Argentina, South Africa, or any of the places that we claim are guilty of human rights violations. What about the human rights violations right here in our own country, in the city of Detroit? All right, get that. Here we had Humpty and Dumpty that were brought in to run the New York City transit system. Kylie from Boston, and our friend Gunn from the SEPTA system in Philadelphia. And you're familiar with the Philadelphia system. This man is possessed by going after graffiti artists. That's all he knows. Yet the violent crimes, the kinds of attacks and atrocities that have made that a cesspool of a sewer of crime have gone unheeded. Remember 5 years ago when we started? The cops were screaming, we don't have enough transit police. Because of fiscal constraint, they cut their numbers down to 1,700. And I agreed with them. They were under personnel. But now we have 3,500 transit cops, Bob. More cops in our subways than in the streets of Philadelphia, than in the streets of Detroit, than in the streets of most American cities. Where are they? It's not that they're not doing the job. They're being assigned to watch the fare beaters and to ride the trains looking for graffiti artists when, as you saw, what did we tell this woman the other day on the DeKalb Avenue station of the Double L? The woman who had her ankle severed from her body as she vainly fought off these punks and thugs and yahoos. Where were the cops when she needed them, as has happened to so many riders? Why did they invest their time and money in all these nuances that don't attack the root of the problem?
You know, we're having Bill McKechnie of the Transit PBA tomorrow.
Oh, brother. One of our long adversarial people. I might ask one question, Bob. You know, he used to cry we don't have enough people. But if you might, just take a negative point, maybe on 3 points, then this is what I've seen of the transit police. They've got 3,500 now. He says the reason that the crime is up is they're all being deployed at night. Bob, that's when the violent crime takes place. That's when the hooligans come out on their witch hunts and start picking at the carcasses of the citizenry. Why do they stand at the turnstiles? Why every time you go looking for them, they're clumped together 3 or 4 with a cup of coffee and a donut? And now what infuriates me even more, everybody's John Travolta down there with the hair blown, you know, the dry blown hair. They don't wear their caps. They're blue caps that, you know, you can pick them out like a lollipop in the sea of humanity. They no longer wear it. They're too used to having their hair styled, and this bugs me. Where are the supervisors? We attack the TWU workers in their union, and let's face it, a lot of them are still out to lunch. But why is nobody going to war on the transit police union for not providing productivity? Crime is up 13%. Let's point the finger of blame where it may. And I think William McKechnie's got to absorb some of it.
Case of the 28-year-old woman down at the DeKalb station who lost a leg because two mutations were roaming around snatching chains. Curtis, these two cretins, they're teenagers. They probably will get what amounts to a slap on the wrist and probably will be back out there plying their trade in no time. Don't you think so?
Absolutely. They'll be up in Spotsford having a whirl of a time, playing bunker pool, basketball, ping pong, a better life than they may have ever had in the street. What we need here, though, is the message of fighting back. Remember, that woman was fighting back. Where were the other passengers? They should have been right at her side. They could have picked these two little punks up right off their bottom sides and turned them over to the police. With the rapist that's loose in East Flatbush, what are the police telling women? Don't walk the streets at night. Don't leave your house. Give up. Wave the white flag. Tell the criminals you win. Come on in. Take it over. Let's move out. I'm tired of this, Bob. These people are the servants of us. They should be encouraging us, cheerleaders, pumping us up to fight back within the law. And what do they make it? You know, we're the biggest nation of wimps around anywhere in the world. And right here in New York City, the upper hand is that of the criminal. There's more of the good guys and good gals than the bad guys and bad gals, but you'd never know it because we all cower in fear, hide, refuse to get involved. And where typical reaction is, well, I pay my taxes, where's the cop? How many people were on that double L train that sped through DeKalb Avenue that night? 40, 50. How many of them grown men that could have picked both guys up in one hand and probably crushed them and didn't flex a muscle? Those are the people that I blame. When we start doing that, when we start getting roused up, catalyzing, getting involved, then it won't matter if it's Koch, Cuomo, Kiley, or Gunn, because we will have control of the system again. That's what we're fighting about, Bob.
And that slams the lid on things for today. Until tomorrow, Bob Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get Gaddafi. Up next. Some of the well-known ball players and even not so well-known ball players that you represent.
Represent Eddie Murray of the Baltimore Orioles, Mike Boddicker, who also plays for the Orioles, Rick Dempsey, who is MVP of the World Series, Doug DeCinces, who plays for the California Angels, Butch Weiniger, who plays in New York, Willie Aikens, who was just recently traded to the Toronto Blue Jays, Lamar Hoyt plays for Chicago, Jim Beattie plays for Seattle.
Even though it's a woman's voice, she's an agent who represents a lot of well-known baseball players.
It's amazing.
Well, as long as the Yankees don't, I don't mind, because I hate the Yankees.
Okay.
I can't get you to comment on that.
On the Yankees?
Yeah.
No. I have no feeling for the Yankees one way or the other. I also have...
A federal appeals court has taken Attorney General William French Smith off the hook. It told him he doesn't have to obey a judge's order that he name a special prosecutor in the Carter briefing book case by Monday. You remember Carter? Jimmy, I never lie to you. Carter? I want to congratulate him on pointing out that if a crime was committed in the so-called Debategate papers, the crime was committed by Democrats. Because Congressman Albasta, a Democrat of Michigan, says that papers that were taken were government papers. Otis Pike points out that this is very interesting that they were official government papers in view of the fact the federal law is supposed to forbid the taxpayers from paying anybody for working on a re-election campaign or an election campaign. I mean, you get it? If those briefing papers, in other words, little tips to the former president, Jimmy Carter, were tips to help him in his debate with the then former governor, Ronald Reagan, then it wasn't really a government paper at all. It was a paper that had to do with political re-election. Anyway, if you read Mr. Pike's syndicated column yesterday, he really puts in proper perspective something that doesn't even merit being called a tempest in a teapot. It's nothing, absolutely nothing. But some people do grasp at straws. Do you grasp at straws? For the Legislative Council of the American Civil Liberties Union, that's right. Every now and then we have to talk to the enemy. He feels that certain aspects of the pending Simpson-Mazzoli immigration reform bill could lead to a system of ID cards. He's full of hot air, for crying out loud. The ACLU, they've been running this country for a long time. There's nothing we can do about it. You know, from the very moment that the United States granted diplomatic recognition to the Gaddafi regime on September 6th of 1969, what's all that noise? Is it the air conditioner in here? Is that noise going out over the air? Or is it, oh, it's okay. I only hear it. That's all right. The guy doing the show is the only one who is distracted by it. Okay, good. I tell you, this would be a great place to open up a radio studio. What is that noise? It's terrible. And I'm hard of hearing, and I can hear it. Anyway, September 6, 1969, I think, is where I stopped myself. It was apparent that the United States had given legitimacy to an implacable and intractable foe. And I'm talking about Muammar Gaddafi. And people stop me all the time and say, when are you going to get Gaddafi? Well, who knows? I may have to get him myself instead of asking others to get him. But I'd like to get Gaddafi and Khomeini all in one shot. But can you imagine the Iranians warning the United States to stay out of Persian Gulf waters? And of course I can imagine them saying that. After all, they got away with taking 52 American hostages and holding them for 444 days and taking the American embassy, didn't they? So why shouldn't they feel they can dictate to us?
Number one, can you tell me what the heck Jesse Jackson is doing in Mexico? Is he running for office in Mexico?
Well, he's got his own country, apparently.
Yeah, I think he's trying to get elected someplace.
Well, you know, I tell you something. This man is riding for a fall. You mark my words. Within the next year or so, this man's going to go completely meshuggah because his ego can't handle what's going on. He's going wild. Did you see him gloat with the fact that the camera was on him as he came out of some meeting with some low echelon? And by the way, I want to compliment, I haven't had any reason to compliment Miguel de la Madrid, the president of Mexico, until now. De la Madrid showed what he really thought of Jackson. He didn't meet him, you know.
Oh, at least somebody has some common sense. I also wanted to comment on...
But this is ridiculous. Here's a guy going around being treated, or seemingly being treated like he's an official of the United States. He's no official.
I mean, imagine if Mondale or...
What is his job? Would you tell me what his office is, what he was elected to? Would you tell me, please? I'd like to know.
I'd like to know the same thing.
What is it, a government in exile? Is that what he's representing? If so, let him get in exile.
My program last night. Did you see it last night?
No, I tell you, I can't take Ted Koppel anymore and his obsequiousness with finks.
I agree.
And the way he gets on his knees with Vladimir Posner and those other skunks from Moscow.
I agree. I just wanted to...
And for anybody who is on the conservative side of things, he cross-examines them like he's practicing to be a prosecuting attorney for Essex County or something, you know?
He had on yesterday.
And besides, his head is getting on my nerves. It's getting bigger and bigger. You know, that Koppel's head is getting bigger and bigger, literally. Either that or he needs a new barber. I don't know. I can't take Koppel anymore. I'm sorry.
He had on last night, Major General George Patton III.
Yeah, I know, and made sure that Patton was outnumbered by about 3 or 4 jerks.
When you see a decent American like Patton who gave so much of his life to this country...
let's...
You have to argue with these draft dodgers in Canada.
Well, I don't mind the... Well, listen, let me say this, though, in all fairness. Patton knew who he was going on with. You know, they didn't... I don't think they sandbagged him.
He's such a decent person compared to some...
Of course he is, but that's, you know, you want to have a good guy and a bad guy. That part I don't quibble with. We're ahead of steam here, but now it's time to slam the lid on things. We got a lot of people who want to talk. See, they get worked up. They want controversy. They want controversy. Oh, until tomorrow, Bob Grant reminding you Lee McPhail will be with us. Your influence counts. Use it. Get Gaddafi. Now, Congressman Connie Mack, ladies and gentlemen, on our WMCA Newsmaker line, a congressman, a Republican from Florida. I guess that means you're really getting to the speaker that he's got to pull stunts like that.
Well, I think so, and I think that, frankly, the actions that he involved himself in several, I guess almost 2 weeks ago now, basically where he came down on the floor and tried to bully his way through the rules of the House, probably does indicate that we've gotten him to respond, and that's what we're trying to do.
Is the speaker losing control?
Well, it's probably a little early to say that the speaker's losing control. He certainly lost control during that series of days, surrounding this debate with Mr. Gingrich and several others. And there's some people, some of the old members that have contacted me. They're retired today, say that they really question whether the speaker really learned how to be speaker. The point that they were making is that while there have been many very partisan individuals that moved to the position of Speaker of the House, once they got there, they became very, very fair in their approach. And there are many people that are claiming today that the Speaker is not being fair with the way he approaches his position, the agenda that we debate, and things of that nature.
It seems to me that this situation is deteriorating. We interviewed Mr. Gingrich on this very same program last week. And I'd like you to explain to our audience here in the metropolitan New York area what you did with, what is it, some videotapes or film of the speaker? What is it that you did? And maybe you were being kind of not nice to do it.
Well, I'm not sure that it really falls into a category of not being nice. What I did was basically say that I thought that the speaker's actions starting back in 1983, the latter part of the year, and through the series of events bringing the ERA vote to the floor of the House under suspension of the rules, which only allowed debate 20 minutes on each side for a constitutional amendment, was the wrong thing to do. To arbitrarily change the rules as to how unanimous consent requests are debated and things of that nature, I wanted to bring together a series of those statements where the Speaker just basically stood on the floor of the House and said, I have the power to control what goes on around here. In essence, if you don't like it, that's too bad. I brought the tapes, put the tapes together and brought them to a conference that we had of House Republicans to say to them that, that they just couldn't any longer just sit back and be rolled over without standing up and fighting for what they're believing in or what they believe in. And let me just, if I could, add one more comment. I was on the C-SPAN show where the people call in from various parts of the country, and one of the callers, called in and said, Mr. Mack, you're a good-looking young man, articulate, the Republican Party ought to be proud of you, but then he said, what the hell's wrong with you? And it kind of stunned me, and he went on further to say, don't you believe in what you're saying? Don't you believe in the issues that you're talking about? And I said, well, of course I do. And he says, well, why don't you get out there and fight for what you believe in? And I think that's basically what has happened. The Speaker's actions have become a catalyst for our party on the floor of the House, and say that no longer are we going to hide behind the excuse that we can't do anything because we're the minority party.
Is it true to some suggestion that you're focusing on Tip O'Neill because he does have a negative image, because he does look like the typical backroom pal, wheeling and dealing, and because of his years and because of his portliness is an easy target?
Well, I'm sure there's some that may think that, but frankly, it's a little bit more to it than that. We feel that we have to have some way, something that would form a catalyst for our people, and we feel that by going after the Speaker, who, after all, is specifically blocking the agenda of items that we want to talk about, that if we can make that point, that he is arbitrarily, that is the leadership of the Liberal Democratic Party, is blocking the ability of a great number of Americans from having issues discussed on the floor of the House that they want to, that's really the reason that we're going after him. We are going after him because we only have limited amount of time to talk about our issues, and that's when we have special orders at the end of the day. And the Speaker is now playing around with that special order time, and we're not going to sit back and take it.
Well, you talk about not sitting back and take it, and the Speaker felt the same way, though. He didn't like the idea that people like Newt Gingrich and Representative Walker of Pennsylvania, particularly Walker of Pennsylvania, were showing tapes of them addressing the House of Representatives, and turned out there were just a bunch of empty seats. 434 people were not there listening.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that what the Speaker's comments as to why he came down and defended
his colleagues, frankly, is not true. There was an article, Evans Nowak did a piece in the Post not too long ago, where they went back and also reviewed and asked Tony Quello whether he has reviewed the tapes. There was no motions, implying that there were Democrats sitting out there and that they wouldn't come down. So the Speaker actually is misleading the public when he made those statements.
Well, you mean to say that Representative Walker at no time referred, actually, I believe it's Robert Walker, he referred to the Speaker as though the Speaker were sitting in his chair up there?
No, he did not do that.
Well, if he didn't do that, how is it that so many people believe that he did? Apparently, Tip is convincing some people. Not only is Tip convincing some people, but the allegation's been going around, or the rumor's been going around, that your own leader, Bob Michael of Illinois, somehow or other tacitly agrees with the Speaker.
Well, that's actually before Bob Michael was aware of of what was going on. He said, you don't condone that kind of activity, and Mr. Michael basically was saying, in essence, if that was going on, I wouldn't condone it, but the fact that he said that I wouldn't condone it is not a statement that he said that either Walker or Gingrich did it. In fact, the videotapes are available to be looked at, and they just, Mr. Gingrich did not challenge if there were people sitting out in the audience that they ought to come down. He just didn't do it.
Congressman Mack, speaking of tape,
yeah.
The tape that you call Tip's Greatest Hits, which was shown to reporters yesterday, runs how long?
Well, okay, let me put this into perspective because, again, there's some, the reporting of it's not really very accurate. The films that were seen, or the tapes that were seen yesterday by reporters were produced by the NRCC, the National Republican Congressional Committee, and were introduced by Congressman Guy Vanderjack, and that was done at the instruction of under the auspices of the NRCC. The tape that I put together was maybe about 9 minutes of tape off the floor of the House, which was shown to the Republican conference about 2 weeks ago. They're two different things. I did the first, that is, I did the one about the 9 minutes on the floor of the House. The tapes that were shown yesterday, the commercials that will be running on, I think it is CNN and maybe in some test areas, was produced by the NRCC and was not at my direction.
Are you interested at all in talking to a colleague of yours who's on the other side of the aisle, Congressman Bill Alexander of Arkansas?
Sure. Referring to which is not a vote, as he called it. Bob, I think what you're referring to is that when the Speaker's words were taken down and the chair ruled that the Speaker's words were out of order, there was not a vote on that particular issue. I think that there are many people who felt on both sides of the aisle that it shouldn't have been said, but Bill can respond to that.
Well, the Speaker was responding to the tactics of some of the Republicans in a procedure that they are using in order to address an empty House, giving the appearance that they are speaking to a House which is filled with members. The Speaker was outraged because one or possibly two of the members impugned the integrity and the patriotism of some of the Democratic members by inferring that they were communists. And so he took to the House floor to answer the charges of Congressman Walker of Pennsylvania and Congressman Gingrich of Georgia, during which he demonstrated his outrage and was held to be out of order by the Speaker pro tem after his attitude, his outrage, was objected to by the members on the Republican side. I think that's what you have reference to.
A comment to Bill, one of Bill's first comments, and that is much to do about nothing. I can understand from his vantage point, or from anyone's vantage point, if we're really arguing over whether the floor of the House is going to be panned by the TV cameras, I don't think that's much of an argument. In fact, most of us, at least on the Republican side, feel that the cameras ought to be able to be used in any manner that they want to during all of the proceedings on the floor of the House, not just during special orders. And if one wants to bring up the fact that there's an empty chamber of the House, let's mention the fact that there's an empty chamber of the House almost all the time, whether it's special orders or whether the committees are down on the floor with their particular pieces of legislation. But here's my point. We think there is a lot to do about a lot of things. What we're
we're doing on special orders is we're getting down there and talking about the issues that we think that the American people want to talk about. Balanced budget amendment, line item veto, criminal justice reform, immigration reform, things of that nature. And this is the only time that those of us in the minority, outside of 1 minute at the beginning of the day, have an opportunity to talk about those particular issues, because the Democratic leadership of the House can control the agenda every day, throughout the legislative process. Well, again, Bob, let me respond to that. That's exactly the question that we keep raising. We think that there are a number of things that immigration reform has been put off month after month after month, and there's some that say that it's been put off again until after the June 5th primary in California.
It's scheduled for June 11th.
The Democratic presidential candidates, don't want to have to debate that issue in California. There are many of us that feel that we ought to have the opportunity to debate and possibly pass a balanced budget amendment. There's a number of us that feel that we ought to have the opportunity to at least discuss on the floor of the House.
Well, let me respond to those
criminal justice reform, which we're not allowed to do, that we can't even get hearings in the Judiciary Committee, and that legislation was passed in the Senate 91-1. Now that's where the debate is.
What was the last point that you say you didn't have a hearing on?
The criminal justice reform.
Well, let me respond to those 3 points, taking them in reverse. First of all, the Congress has passed a criminal justice reform act last year, which was vetoed by the president.
Bill, you know as well.
Well, now hold on a minute. This year, you mentioned immigration. That is scheduled for consideration on June the 11th, all week, and I hope that we can finish it in a week. And as far as your balanced budget amendment is concerned, that is the biggest fraud that I've ever heard perpetrated by anybody in my life. We took that up last year or a year before last, had a full hearing on it, and it was defeated soundly. The Republicans keep beating these dead horses over there like nothing has ever been done, when in fact the record clearly demonstrates the outcome of the last debate and vote on that particular issue.
The Speaker buried this Simpson-Mazzoli bill, and I want to point out for the edification of our listeners that Congressman Mazzoli, if I'm not mistaken, is a member of your party, Bill.
The so-called Simpson-Mazzoli bill, or Mazzoli bill as we refer to it in the House, is scheduled for deliberation on June the 12th. The reason that it has been rescheduled so many times is because the Hispanic American community in this country is very much opposed to this bill. They're violently opposed to it. And they, from their own point of view, have a legitimate and sincere reason for being opposed.
You raise a very serious point. You're saying that any pressure group, all they have to do is make a lot of noise, and they'll keep legislation from being voted on the floor of the House?
We in the
That's
Congress,
a heck of a way to run a country, Congressman.
Well, that's your opinion. We in the Congress pay attention to the interest of the American people and the will of the American people. We listen very carefully to the opinion of everyone.
Well, you're focusing on the so-called Hispanic community. Even the New York Times has severely criticized the Speaker for sitting on the Mazzoli bill.
Let me raise one other point, if I could, Bob, about the constant rescheduling. What I have seen in just 16 months, it seems to be fairly typical, is to schedule major pieces of legislation towards the end of a session or towards the time when a recess is being developed. This one, there's going to be a tremendous amount of amendments that are going to be attempted to be added to the bill, which means that at some point, which I believe is what happened back 2 years ago, and Bill, you'll have to clarify that point, is that we just basically ran out of time and had to be moved over to the next session. And it seems to us that this whole process of delay has been, to set up the same scenario so there won't be enough time to debate it. It'll have to be moved out probably again into September, and then there'll be other reasons why it'll be delayed even more.
Well, it's an important issue, and I agree with you. It should be scheduled for consideration. The country has lost control of our own borders, and the question of national immigration policy is one that is long overdue, and it is time to resolve many of the issues that are presented by it.
Gentlemen, I want to thank both of you for a lively discussion. WMCA, hello.
Hi, Bob. My name's Bill. I'm from Manhattan. Congressman Alexander is completely wrong when he says Hispanics are against Simpson-Mazzoli. The fact is that the vast majority of the Hispanics do want that law because it would keep other illegals out of the country. They're having a rough enough time getting jobs as is. Their leaders, who represent a very small number of them, are for the law. being taken away by illegals. And he wrote a column, and it cites survey after survey that shows the...
well, you know why Strawberry takes that view? Because Strawberry's a very intelligent, very hardworking columnist. And Jesse Jackson could learn a few lessons from Mr. Strawberry.
Yeah, well, that's
because
true.
Jackson's going around in typical demagogic style, blasting Simpson Mazzoli, you know.
Well, I think Alexander is a demagogue for saying that the Hispanics, he said they were violently against the law, and that's just untrue.
Even if they are, what is this a country for Americans or for every little pressure group that comes along?
Steaming. I've been recuperating from an illness, and I've been watching C-SPAN religiously for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and I even have it on VCR. Tip O'Neill is a dead-faced liar. Those two gentlemen, Gingrich and Walker, were not appearing to make the people believe that there was somebody sitting in the audience. In fact, I wish Mr. Mack would have brought up the fact that Mr. Walker invited those people to sit at that exchange, and they put Tip O'Neill made a whole big thing about, oh, you shouldn't have put it in a mail, it takes 4 or 5 days or whatever. Those gentlemen are just trying to be heard. They cannot be heard during the day. They cannot bring up what they want. And Tip O'Neill, I think, is like 5 years overdue. He should be stuffed away somewhere and put in a barn. I'm sorry.
What are you sorry about? Tell me why you said you're sorry.
I'm so steamed at the way the Democrats rule that House.
Well, I tell you, they didn't do it that way when the great Sam Rayburn was the speaker.
That's right. O'Neill spends half his day in the bar and the other half in the back room.
Oh, my.
Take care, Bob.
Thank you very much. Paul of Teaneck.